So just starting it off, I'm going to toss it down there to Miss Brenda and Hollis. Talk to me about the conception of this show and why you guys felt that a dramedy set in 1965 was something that the world needed.
Well, Brenda and
Hollis has the microphone.
okay, this is something you should learn early on, that the person with the microphone and the person with the typewriter has all the power. So this is just something to keep in mind if you're moving in this direction. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I had the only microphone, but that's an interesting situation. Brenda and I met on a television show, and we immediately became sort of very, very good friends. And we had a moment where we said to each other, listen, if we don't get picked up on a show that we like, why don't we do our own show? And I was like, oh, okay, that's a very good idea. And then we just basically sat down and talked about our lives. But something was going on at that time, too, in the world. And we were very interested in the world and what was going on culturally and politically. And something called Columbine had just happened, which was very awful and serious and harkens to sort of today. And what's interesting is that sometimes a lot of comedy and deep pathos, sort of presents itself at the same time. And we talked about why was that happening with kids at that time. What was different about, we grew up in the 60s. We had, the space race was going on. We had a lot of optimism and a sense of idealism. We cling to that now in difficult times. And why was that happening? And we talked about that. We started talking about our different childhoods and what that meant. Now I'm going to pass it over to Brenda because she went to a Catholic school, and there was a little Jewish girl at her school that reminded her of me, and we talked about that.
As much as this was Hollis's story that she wanted to tell, I had a similar situation of that I wanted to talk about me, because it's all about me. But in fact, it had as much to do with the fact that I was raised in the South, and I, like Hollis, felt like that my part of the country and my stories had been misrepresented by the media, that I grew up in the South that was not, it's shake and bake and I helped. I grew up in the South that was cultured, that had, educated people, and I went to a Catholic girls' school, and at this Catholic girls' school, one of my best friends was Jewish, and both of her parents were Holocaust survivors, and Connie Lerner grew up to become Miss North Carolina. She played the Virgin Mary in the Christmas play every year, and she looked like every picture of the Virgin Mary that was hanging in the school. And when I mentioned this to Hollis, she looked at me and she said, that's a series. So that was really what sort of got us talking about it, and then it just evolved from there about, we felt like we were living in a time where kids were not overscheduled, where children had an opportunity to sort of go outside and explore, and if you had one best friend in your life, you could get through just about any situation. And we had very similar ideas in that, and Hollis was really the one who said, you don't see shows about girls who have adventures. You don't see shows about girls that are, have curiosity and excitement in their lives, and we wanted to represent that because that's who we were.
Yeah, we thought the girls' coming of age story was as thrilling and scary and funny and embarrassing and all that stuff as the boys' coming of age story, but sadly at that time there were no girls' coming of age stories, and we thought we want to see that, and that's why we want to do the show.
Well, and for May and Alia, talk to me about your audition process for the series, because I understand they were both a little different, and how quickly did you guys form that friendship that you now have 14 years later?
Here we go. May Whitman, the actress, where we met. I don't need to list the resume, but one fine day, Independence Day. We're talking hope floats. I mean, the girl was a star. Is. And anyway, so I don't know, but you were like, oh. Okay, well, you can, and then I'll tell
I had already gotten the part,
Yes.
and then they brought in girls to do a chemistry read for the Hannah character, and I was like, remember feeling like, I was like flying high, I was like feet kicked on the table, like having, like, and girls were like kind of sucking up to me, and I was like bringing me presents, and I was like, yeah, thanks, like so into it. And like,
yeah, they literally brought presents. These girls were at an audition, were 11 years old, and they were like, what'd you bring for me?
yeah.
And I was like, I don't know, man. I hope we get to know each other. I was very professional at the end. And my mom was like, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And we just like stayed in the corner there, all were socializing with me.
Everybody was begging for it except Alia, who was like in the corner in like the most expensive looking clothes, like perfect, like interesting adult, like Prada square shoes. She was like 10. I was like, who the fuck is that? I was so like intimidated already. And then we went in the audition, and they had told me before we did the show, they were like, it's really important that you feel comfortable and that you get somebody that you want in there, and we really want your opinion. It's gonna factor in a big way, whatever. So we like did it, and everybody was nice, whatever. And then Alia came in last, and she was funnier than me, and I was like, well, and I felt threatened. And we went out in the hall, and Stan, the producer, was like, so who'd you think? And I was like, I gotta say, I loved them all except that last one. I just didn't feel, and like, they were like, great. And then like the next morning, it was like, Alia was cast in it, and I was like, what the fuck? I was so miffed. And then what was our first week like? It wasn't like immediate, was it?
No, I don't think it was immediate. We're doing really good with the passing, by the way. We share still. Yeah, I mean, I had never been on a show before, and so like the whole process of it was like a little different. And I was very, very quiet at the beginning. I was just like a little scared, and more or less we were like that, in our characteristics. May was like so comfortable and like outgoing, and yeah, a lot of our business comfort to me. And I was just kind of like a little sheep. I would just be like, oh, whatever you want to do. And yeah, it was like a week of like sussing each other out, I think, and then just like formed into an eternal bond that has changed my life.
Yeah, it's true. Right when it clicked, it was like forever, nonstop, every second and moment. Like afterwards, just the closest friendship ever.
Aren't you glad that the producers did not listen to you?
I am. It's the first and only time we'll ever admit that. But yes, I am. I'm very glad.
Well, Michael and Faye, the adult roles on State of Grace were so incredibly multifaceted right from the very beginning. Were you surprised to be tackling such weighted topics on something that was pegged as like a family series?
From the perspective of my character, because she was so clueless and drunk most of the time, I didn't judge it personally because it would have probably affected the work, but to me it was just fun, and also getting to drink and smoke on television was really fun. Which they put a stop to that pretty quickly, didn't they?
Eventually they made it.
Yeah. Because it was sending a bad message. Michael?
What was the question? About the weightiness of it.
Yeah.
I was a little concerned because when I first, before I read the script, you just sort of see what the description of the project is, and it was a half hour, which usually means comedy, it's a dramedy. And I was a Holocaust survivor with a Eastern European accent, and there's children. And I thought, wow, why didn't anybody think of that before? And I thought, well, where's the, wow. So, but when I read it, I thought that all the elements were just put together so beautifully. And the voiceover and the writing, which went from, they allowed that, I don't know about heaviness, but the poignancy of it. So you could play a real character without being, bouncy cute and looking for humor. And when the humor did come, it came out of really an organic thing, like the cushions and and the juxtaposition of the two families, which is immediately humorous. So it was wonderful. It was just, you know, a joy to play, even when it was heavy material.
I'm sorry, this cast was wonderful. You know, you don't have a show like this without this kind of marvelous cast. And to a person, when these people walked into the room, Brenda and I, we just knew. I mean, it was done. It was done. It could be a gesture or the chemistry. But it was, that's the person. There was never any, well, let's see, and, you know, we'll see some more. When we saw these people here and also the other actors in the show, we knew at that time, it was, yes, these are the people. And I guess we did pretty well.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing. You know, when you're dealing with young actors, it's always hard because you don't know. I mean, with May, we knew she had a lot of experience. We were fortunate. May's parents are here, Pat and Jeff. And, you know, they were there always, you know, for May. They were present. Alia's parents were there. We never had the problems that you hear about so many times, you know, about difficult child actors. But more than that, you know, these were really smart girls, and they asked really smart questions for young actors. I remember Alia coming to us on the set in the second episode that you saw, and she came over and she said, so do you think that when Hannah asks Taddy that, you know, or says, you know, I can see why Grace really wants to come home. She said, you know, do you think she's doing that because she wants Grace to go home? Well, I don't know, you make that decision, young lady. But you know, when you have a young actor that understands character that significantly, and the same thing happened with May. We were doing an episode where May's horse was going to, I think May's horse died, and it was really a lot of transference about her father dying, and we were going, God, this is, you know, a big stretch. Maybe we need to bring in someone to work with May, you know, to help her through these transitions. So we asked May to come into the office and see if this was something that she wanted, and she walked in and she said, no, I think it's about this, and this. And I go, okay, bye. See you on the set. You know, so what Hollis is saying is really true. We had actors who understood the specificity of their characters, and the specificity of the show was what they got, and they brought it all to life. I have to say that, you know, easily 70% of the success of any series is in the casting. So we were beyond fortunate.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just going to say that I think that it's so interesting from a writer's perspective that 70% of the successes in the casting, I would say that equally that an equal percent is in the writing. So actors can't do it without the writing.
All right, so now let's get into the nitty-gritty as to what happened with the show and where it went. Because we had the first season, it was 13 episodes, and it was on Fox Family. And then Disney bought the network, and then it transitioned into ABC Family. And State of Grace was one of the only shows that was transitioned over to this new network. And then things got a little hazy. So, ladies, could you please weigh in on what happened once it became ABC Family? Brenda?
Well, I was going to say Nancy probably knows more.
Yes.
Well,
Well, it's as simple as, but this isn't a happy story, but you have something gorgeous and beautiful that was created and nurtured by a guy named Haim Saban, who had a lot of money from Power Rangers. You guys remember that? He made so much money that he was able to buy a channel from Pat Robertson and do something had never been heard of, which was to take this thing and try to like ease it or smash it into something much more interesting. And so he assembled, was one of the executives, and I had a brilliant boss who were tasked with like evolving this. So we really carefully did that, and we saw Freaks and Geeks and Malcolm in the Middle. We thought, let's do that, like let's create that. We met Brenda and Hollis. They had this great idea. We're gonna take this, let's go put this show on TV, and we made it happen, which was impossible at the time. Millions of dollars went into a show for about 2 like amazing young women, but the merits, you know, were frightening for people who made Power Rangers, whatever. So while all that's happening, Haim is talking to Michael Eisner and sells the channel. We didn't see that coming. None of us saw that coming. We're like, what, how did that happen? And so the ownership, the people who authored it, the people who really cared about it, went away. You know, I was still there, but I was just one of many. So a whole new regime came in, and they were kind of confused, and they wanted to rebrand the channel. And in that, to be generous to them, this attempt to rebrand the channel, they came up with a lot of ideas that didn't include Gilmore Girls, Freaks and Geeks, and State of Grace, which we had created. They wanted to do something completely different, and that's kind of what happened. I mean, it's as simple and sad as that.
For the cast, what did you guys think about when you found out that State of Grace was going to be moving networks? Did that resonate with you at all at the time?
I mean,
I think ultimately, yeah. Well, I was concerned with their business. I know. I mean, I think I don't know. I think you can sense stuff even when you're young. You know, it's frightening to have like champions and then go somewhere that you're unsure of. I mean, I think we just, you know, this like show was our adolescence. It's like we don't even really remember this as being a show. We really remember this as like our growing up experience. I mean, I learned everything. I became who I am on this show and with Alia and stuff, and we were learning so much along with the characters and growing so much that it you know, you can sense, you know, when things change hands, when things are building so beautifully, it's a little frightening, I think, and especially some people there, one person in particular who I won't name, didn't really understand us and sort of didn't really maybe have a heart at all in there. So there was kind of, you know, that doesn't feel good to feeling really, go from being really supported to, you know.
No, I think that what May's saying is accurate, and you know, and Nancy has given the overall perspective, but what it felt like from the creative end for the writers and you know, and the actors and all the other people that go into making a TV show that are incredibly creative. Basically what happened the second season, suddenly our show started moving around and no one could find it on the dial. And, you know, why was that happening? Well, you know, sometimes networks move shows around. And then when that happens, they lose viewership, and then the ratings go down, and then you get canceled because of low ratings. And that's kind of what happened. We sort of, you know, fell into that hole because of what Nancy set up. And I have to say that as the creators, Brenda and I were a little surprised. We were nervous because we hadn't had a lot of contact with the new heads of production, and however, we really did not see the acts coming. And at that time, we'd been nominated for 2 Humanitas, and we're winning all these awards, and had all these, you know, we had Frances McDormand, for God's sakes, just off of Fargo doing our, you know, playing adult Hannah for scale because she liked the script. So. Are we bitter? Well, you know, this should not have gone down this way. So we want to get it back streaming, so we have a new thing now. Hashtag, what is it? Hashtag
Stream Saving Grace.
Stream
State of Grace.
Stream State of
The
Grace.
Sean Penn film, make
Yes.
sure.
Because,
We don't want them to see that.
Yeah. We don't want to go gently into that good night. So that's not. That's not what Hannah and Grace would do. You know, Hannah and Grace had a thing called the force of fun. And when Brenda and I ran into trouble, we had a lot of trouble selling this in the beginning until we found Nancy, who, by the way, her boss is Rob Sorcher, who went on then to greenlight Mad Men. So we were in really good company. We got very, very lucky with that. But we had something called the force of fun. And it really was a force of fun, which meant you can get through anything if you have one friend and you just go. And that's sort of what we're doing now. And I think it's just a nice rule to live by.
Yes, we kept streaming, so we can just watch it all the time, before bed and in the morning and stuff. So that's all we really try.
Now, if I'm doing my math correctly, which is questionable because I'm better with words, the show ended 14 years ago, which would put Grace and Hannah as two 27-year-olds in 1980. What do you think that they would be up to? Where do you feel like they ended up? I'm going to ask you ladies, and then we're going to check in with Brenda and Hollis because they have the real answer.
I mean, I've been thinking about it for the past 15 years. Can I get my notes? I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. In a way, we were those characters when we were young, and as May said, it was our adolescent time, and it was such an adventure on set every day. Like literally just going to set felt like an episode of State of Grace. But you know, now I mean, I'm in such a like reminiscent mode to like go into a functional creative zone right now. But I will. I like to think that Hannah is a writer. And she's you know, probably still struggling with like where she wants it to be, but she's been like working for interesting news companies and stuff. You know, writing her novel, challenge, and Grace is like, well, I guess that's your job. They're still in touch. No, I just felt like, yeah, Grace travels a lot and is like keeping her open. Like open to experiences. Grace is keeping her.
I think ultimately probably some reflection of where Alia and I are now. I mean, these people were so much us that I think, you know, the occupation stuff is kind of like, I don't know. I can't go there either. I'm like way too sentimental right now, but I definitely feel that their bond would reflect much like me and Alia's relationship. I mean, we've been like more than attached at the hip ever since we met, and so after that first week, and so I think probably wherever they are, it probably looks a lot like this, but in different clothes and with bigger hair. That would be my guess.
Well, and for Michael and Faye, do you feel like the Rayburns and the McKees, even as the girls were to have grown up, would they have stayed close as families?
I'm not sure Taddy would be alive.
That is so dark, Faye. So very, very dark.
We could do an episode of Taddy's fake funeral.
Life spirit.
Yeah, my spirit.
Brenda and Hollis, where do you think they ended up, though?
Well, you have the mic. I have
Again, a truism. Well, you know, we had thought of doing, we have often thought, not necessarily in the 80s, but it could be, in the 70s in Los Angeles, bringing the girls there. And yeah, Hannah, maybe, we might have talked about this a few times, and Hannah has gone off and become a war correspondent and sort of come back and had a little post-traumatic stress and kind of rolls around and ends up in LA. Even though she loves the Rayburns, they are somewhat suffocating, and she needs to declare her independence.
She had to get out.
She had to get out. So, and she ends up with a little magazine there. It's not People magazine, but it's like a People magazine, because she is just completely sort of, you know, torn apart by what happened to her overseas. And there's like there's a bad boyfriend that's chasing and things like that. So she starts to go into this world, this new world that we're in now and have been in for a long time, of celebrity and what that means. And she's also in a career for the first time, and she's thinking,
We shot a movie. This is okay. Surprise! We made this.
I don't know what I want to do. Yeah, okay. So yeah, all the stuff that happens. Is this ethical? What are we doing? What does this all mean? In other words, we would carry them through to the challenges of that decade. That's what we tried to do in the 60s, was to write and calibrate their lives, personally, but to that decade, and what were those challenges. And so we would do that. And then here's Brenda.
Grace is in jail. Hannah bails her out. When we first meet Tattie's on the run from some guy who's, following her. And, we actually sort of talked about this. Is this where Grace is? That, Grace is a little bit of a jet setter like Tattie. She is her mother's daughter. And she is, on the lam from some guy. She ends up in LA. And as you recall, Mrs. Rayburn almost runs over Grace, when they first meet, and we kind of think that Hannah, maybe driving down Hollywood Boulevard, almost runs over Grace, trying to get to some appointment, but that they have separated a little bit in their lives, and that they would come back together in the 70s as we would explore this notion of celebrity, and that Grace is that iconic figure that's sort of finding her way through this world. And again, Hannah is there covering this world. And as women were starting to evolve in the 70s, as Gloria Steinem was coming, into being, and Ms. Magazine, and women were starting to evolve in the workplace, that we would have these two characters suddenly interact again, but in the world of LA. And
You guys write it. We'll I'll get the money.
I was gonna say.
We're in. We're not. All right. We found a lot of money recently. So.
You heard it here. Also, great clothes, great music.
Yeah.
we've got a first draft, okay?
All right. Yes. All right, first of all, these two actresses here, there's been a lot about these two little girls, and they're not little anymore, but these two actors here are really super fantastic.
Yeah.
They're adults, and they're still really good. Thank you.
State of grace.
Dream State of Grace.
Dream State of Grace.
Thank you guys.